John Chapman was a former Marine Corps veteran. The scenes of his comrades dying on the battlefield left him with severe PTSD. The only thing that gave him a fleeting moment of peace was playing a deadly game with his own life. He set 3 shot glasses in front of him, placing 1 bullet in one glass and 2 in the others. He randomly picked one, filled it with alcohol, and drank it all in one gulp. Next, he pulled out a revolver, took the bullets from his mouth, and loaded them into the gun. Without hesitation, he pressed the barrel to his chin, saluted with his right hand, closed his eyes, and pulled the trigger. There was only a faint sound. The gun didn't fire. His tense shoulders relaxed, but there was no sense of relief in his eyes, just an even deeper emptiness. This was the result of the severe post-traumatic stress disorder he had developed. Chapman had been deployed to the battlefield in Afghanistan. The deaths of his comrades left him with deep psychological scars. And after his discharge, Chapman became overwhelmed by anxiety. Life had no direction for him, so he spent each day working out excessively to numb his pain. One day, while buying alcohol at a supermarket, Chapman encountered a robbery. Everyone else complied and lay down on the floor, but Chapman seemed oblivious to the danger behind him. Seeing this, one of the robbers walked over and said,
"I said get down."
But Chapman wasn't afraid. Instead, he suddenly pressed the robber's gun to his own chest. When the robber hesitated, Chapman even put the barrel in his mouth. The robber froze in shock. Chapman then moved the gun to his forehead. Seeing that the robber still didn't react, Chapman grew impatient. Another robber tried to sneak up on him, but was quickly subdued. Chapman grabbed the liquor he had chosen earlier and took a wad of cash from the robber's pocket, tossing it onto the counter.
Keep the change.
This tough guy, once a Marine, was clearly not someone you could mess with. However, someone did challenge him. Chapman received a call from his friend Manny Ridley, who informed him that his sister Cindy was in serious trouble in Brazil. Without hesitation, Chapman rushed to Brazil. Upon arriving at the hospital, Chapman found Cindy lying in bed, hooked up to numerous tubes. The doctor informed him that although Cindy was still alive, her injuries were severe, and even if she woke up, she would never fully recover. The officer in charge of the case, Tiago, told Chapman that the case had been classified as a robbery, and they likely wouldn't be able to catch the suspects. Chapman saw how serious Cindy's injuries were and felt this wasn't a simple robbery. He insisted on visiting the crime scene. Tiago took him to a slum area and introduced him to Officer Karina, who worked the area. Just then, a loud sound startled them. It was the noise of a car. As Chapman lowered his gun, he suddenly realized they were surrounded by snipers. Tiago reassured him, and Chapman reluctantly lowered the gun. Tiago then left, passing Chapman to Karina. Karina led Chapman to the crime scene. All they found were some low-level drug dealers in the distance, but there were no other clues. Returning to the hospital, Chapman noticed an Asian nurse giving Cindy an IV. At first, he didn't think much of it, but after the nurse left, Cindy started convulsing. Realizing something was off, Chapman immediately chased after the nurse, but she had already disappeared. He quickly called for the doctor, and after some effort, Cindy stabilized. However, after a full search of the hospital, no trace of the nurse could be found. Chapman's sharp instincts told him that Cindy's injury wasn't just random. The next morning, Chapman went to the beach where Cindy had been injured, hoping to find some clues. He noticed a thug who had been hanging around the area the day before. Since he was always here, he probably knew something. But when the thug saw Chapman approaching, he immediately ran off. Chapman chased him down and stopped him. He noticed the thug was wearing Cindy's necklace. Chapman tried to ask the thug about Cindy's situation, but the thug assumed Chapman was causing trouble. A language barrier caused them to fight. Chapman quickly subdued the thug and his associates. When the thug realized he couldn't win, he pulled out a knife, but Chapman swiftly took him down. Just then, Karina arrived. After some translation, they cleared up the misunderstanding. It turned out that the thug's sister was friends with Cindy, but she had mysteriously disappeared. To comfort him, Cindy had given him the necklace. Although no useful clues were found, the thug gave Chapman Cindy's notebook. A few crucial pages had been torn out, but Chapman was able to trace a phone number from the remaining pages. He quickly called the number and arranged to meet a photographer in a cafe. The photographer explained that Cindy had been investigating a case involving the disappearance of young girls in the slums. For a while, girls had been going missing, and everyone assumed they were dead. But Cindy believed they were still alive, so she had been secretly investigating. Through her investigation, she had uncovered a connection to a trafficking ring. She had hired the photographer to take photos in secret, while she met the people involved. Soon after, Cindy was attacked. The photographer shared all he knew and gave Chapman a USB drive. Chapman didn't expect what happened next. As soon as the photographer got in his car, there was a violent explosion. The photographer died on the spot. Chapman stood in shock, watching the burning car. But then he noticed someone familiar in the crowd. It was the nurse who had been in the hospital. Chapman chased after her, but she got into a car and sped off. Before Chapman could react, another car with several masked men appeared. They opened fire on Chapman. Luckily, he managed to dodge the bullets. But the nearby security guard wasn't so lucky. Chapman grabbed the guard's gun and shot one of the masked men. A gunfight broke out between Chapman and the attackers. Thanks to his excellent shooting skills, Chapman took down several of them. The remaining assailants fled in their car, and Chapman realized that his investigation was headed in the right direction. He quickly opened the USB drive, hoping to find answers. But all that was on it was a photo of Cindy with a man. There was nothing suspicious at first. However, Chapman meticulously enlarged the photo and noticed a name, Colonus Nightclub. He rushed to the nightclub and, after scanning the crowd, spotted the man he was looking for working as the DJ. He waited for the man to go to the restroom and followed him in. But the man had a bodyguard waiting outside. Not fazed by this, Chapman used a swift kick to take the bodyguard down. He then pulled out the photo and confronted the man. The man refused to talk, so Chapman didn't waste time. He shoved the man's head into the toilet. Finally, the man cracked. He revealed that he was an agent working for the Japanese Mafia. Cindy had been investigating the missing girls because they were being trafficked by the Mafia. Some had been sold through him. The reason Cindy had been attacked was that the Mafia found out about their meeting. After hearing the truth, Chapman didn't press him further. Before leaving, he took the man's suitcase, which contained forged shipping documents stamped by the government, indicating that even officials were involved. Following the man's instructions, Chapman tracked down a club, the Japanese Mafia's base of operations. Pretending to be a guest, he entered the hall, unaware that someone was watching him closely. Before long, he was taken to a pavilion by a large man. Chapman saw a group of girls being held, and the thug's missing sister was among them. Just then, a man from behind pulled out a wire to strangle Chapman. But he wasn't a match for Chapman. In a few moves, Chapman took him down and then searched for the girls. He finally found them in a dimly lit room. But when he tried to enter, a bodyguard locked the door behind him. Meanwhile, the thug who had been knocked out was found, and the nurse quickly ordered her men to hunt down Chapman. She called her boss and reported the situation. The Mafia leader immediately called Tiago at the police station. It turned out Tiago had been bought off by the Mafia. Chapman knew he couldn't rescue the girls alone, so he prepared to go get backup. However, he wasn't going to be let go so easily. He was surrounded by enemies, but Chapman didn't panic. He fought off his attackers using his suitcase as a weapon. With a few quick moves, he took down several of them, and then he was ready to leave. Just then, Tiago and his men arrived. Before they could take Chapman away, Karina appeared on the scene. Chapman immediately prepared to lead them to the girls' location. But when they arrived at the holding area, there was no one there. They had all been moved. Faced with the police's doubts, Chapman showed them the shipping documents, hoping to prove his claims. But Tiago took control of the situation, citing the ongoing investigation. As Chapman walked out of the club, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. He thought about the documents and Tiago's suspicious expression. His instincts told him he had missed something important. So he asked Karina to protect his sister and left in a hurry. His concerns weren't unfounded. Soon, the nurse returned to the hospital, taking advantage of the moment when no one was paying attention. She entered Cindy's room and tried to pull out her oxygen tube, but Karina arrived just in time and shot the nurse dead. Meanwhile, Tiago didn't go back to the police station. Instead, he drove to the docks, where he parked in front of a warehouse. What Tiago didn't know was that Chapman had hidden in the trunk of his car. Chapman was right. Tiago was corrupt. Chapman took down the guards at the dock and saw the girls being led to the warehouse. The dock was also home to a Japanese freighter. It was obvious that they were going to sell them to Japan. Chapman immediately called Manny and asked him to notify the police for backup. He snuck into the loading area, where he quickly took out several guards. The gunfire alerted the people making the transaction. The Mafia boss was furious. He didn't want Chapman to ruin the deal, so he immediately ordered his men to take care of Chapman. But little did he know, they were no match for Chapman. As Chapman walked, he kept shooting, quickly taking out a few of the goons. As he continued moving forward, he ran into Tiago. Seeing that Tiago's firepower was too much, he pushed a forklift in front of him and charged forward, knocking Tiago to the ground. Just as he was about to finish Tiago off, another person suddenly appeared to block him. That person quickly grabbed hold of him. And in the struggle, Chapman accidentally dropped his knife. But soon enough, he figured out the person's moves, seized the opportunity, and kicked him down. By this time, Tiago had freed himself. He immediately tried to attack Chapman, but he was no match for him. In just a few moves, Tiago was knocked down, still unwilling to give up. Tiago and his men knew they were outmatched, so they decided to team up against Chapman. As Chapman prepared to face their attack, the Mafia boss came from behind, holding a knife. The three of them surrounded Chapman, but they clearly underestimated his abilities. After a few exchanges, Chapman snatched Tiago's knife, stabbing it into the foot of the guy with the braids. Then he landed a few punches on Tiago's chest, and finally, shoved a cross into his chest. After taking care of those two, Chapman turned to face the Mafia boss. Seeing the katana in his hand, Chapman grabbed 2 steel pipes as weapons. The two of them quickly engaged in a fierce fight. But the Mafia boss's sharp katana still had the upper hand. Chapman was accidentally cut on his back, but that only made him more excited. He instantly became more brutal, and after a few more moves, Chapman took control. He hooked the Mafia boss's neck with the steel pipe and slammed it down hard. A few moments later, Chapman completely took care of the Mafia boss. After finishing off the boss, Chapman picked up a handgun and walked over to Tiago. He knew Tiago was deeply involved in human trafficking, so he must have important criminal evidence in his possession. Right before dying, Tiago finally showed some mercy, handing Chapman a set of keys and telling him the evidence of the gang's crimes, along with a list of corrupt officials, was stored in a bank vault. After receiving the keys, Chapman didn't kill him. Instead, he kicked a handgun in front of him and walked away. Once Tiago got his hands on the gun, he ended his sinful life himself. With Chapman's help, the girls were rescued and quickly sent back home by the police. Meanwhile, Cindy also woke up, but due to the severity of her injuries, she would have a long recovery ahead of her. At least she was out of danger, though. After everything was said and done, Chapman received an appointment letter from Manny and decided to officially become a national agent.